Chapter 3. I think he's dead. Jack hangs up the phone, and continues to sit, with his eyes scanning the apartment's faded peeling walls and well-worn furniture. He is unshaven, with uncombed hair, and still wears his pajamas, which are covered by a tattered bathrobe. Go out and get some air, he mutters to himself, have a smoke and forget about it. After a moment or two, he stands up and heads for the bathroom to groom himself. He dresses and leaves the apartment. As he steps through the doorway, he closes the door and rattles the handle. Gotta make sure it's locked, he thinks to himself, not that it would really make any difference. If they want to get in, that lock will only slow them down for a couple of minutes. Besides, what's there to steal? He proceeds down the winding darkened stairs to the front of the building, and crosses over to a bench near the dirty littered sidewalk. A group of small birds is gathered on the far side. He reaches into his pocket, pulls out a handful of stale popcorn, and throws it to them. He watches as they eagerly scurry for every morsel. Suddenly, a blue jay swoops down, chasing the small birds away, and devours every speck of the abandoned feast. Jack leans back on the bench, and draws a short cigar from his pocket. He unwraps it, snips the end and lights it, and as the first puff of smoke issues from his nose, he drifts back into his thoughts. He is back at the club. A snapshot of the first fairway, with its lush green hue, flashes through his mind, as he exhales, with a long, slow sigh. After a minute or two, the reminiscences fade, along with his faraway stare. "Hey man," comes a voice, over the tap-tap-tap of a basketball, bouncing in the adjacent playground. Hal is a tall, light-skinned black man, who stands with a bent-over slouch, like a man carrying a heavy load. He walks with a slight limp. His remaining hair sports a crew cut, which surrounds a glistening bald spot just above his forehead. Continuing to speak, he takes a seat. "How you doing today, Jack?" "Not bad, Hal. How about you?" "Okay for an old man, I guess. The knee is acting up a little again. Other than that, not bad. I guess it's that old wound from Nam again. They never did get that piece of metal out completely." He pauses, then says, "Did you hear about Maddie?" Without leaving an instant for Jack to answer, Hal immediately begins the story. They walked him down to the bank and made him cash his social security check, then they took the money. "What do you mean they took the money?" asks Jack excitedly. "The dues." "What dues?" exclaims Jack. Hal answers, "I thought I told you about it the other day. I guess they haven't gotten to your building yet. They got a new thing going. They come to everybody's door and say they're collecting for the Fire Prevention Fund. They call it the FPF. They get $50 a month out of everybody. Maddie didn't pay, so they marched him down to the bank, and got the money out of him, right there and then." "What's this FPF stuff?" asks Jack. "Here's what they say, they'll make sure that no fires start in your apartment if you pay your dues. If you don't pay, they'll make sure that a fire does start. You know Petey, the guy that lives in the building next to me? He refused to give them anything. He's a pretty tough guy, an old special forces guy from Nam. Well, a week or two ago, he leaves his house to go to the store, and when he gets back his door is knocked off the hinges and his bed is on fire. Lucky he got home when he did, and could put it out in time, or the whole place woulda went up." "What happened after that?" asks Jack eagerly. "Now Petey's paying his dues, like everybody else," answers Hal in a resigned tone. "Who are these guys anyway?" "A bunch of pricks from the neighborhood, here. Young guys, you know," Hal answers. "They started their own gang. They call themselves the Firemen. They even wear a little tat on the arm, a flame with the letters FM in it. They're just petty crooks and dealers who decided this is an easy way to make money. And, let's face it, they're right. They're dealing with a bunch of old people. How hard is it gonna be? So, why doesn't somebody just call the cops? Are you kidding? The cops don't want any part of down here. And second, who's gonna call? If they find out who it was, you can be goddamn sure that guy's gonna have some serious problems, if you know what I mean," Hal explains. They sit silently, Jack slowly puffing on the cigar, and Hal thumbing through the newspaper he brought with him. "Any good news in there?" Jack asks. "Yanks won 3 in a row," Hal replies, "that's about it." They continue to sit, Hal sporadically commenting on items he is reading in the paper, and Jack courteously responding. After an hour or so, with his cigar consumed to an inch beyond his lips, Jack arises. "Well, that's about it for today. Gotta go up and get supper together. See you tomorrow." He turns and walks toward his building's entrance. As the front door closes behind him with its familiar squeal of metal on metal, he proceeds up the narrow stairs toward his apartment. Jack is lying on the sofa. He has fallen asleep, the television is droning before him. Bang! Bang! The loud pounding on his apartment door awakens him, and, with a start, he immediately springs upright. The door vibrates again. Bang! Bang! He looks at the timestamp on the TV screen. It is 3:30 in the morning. What the hell is going on? He mumbles to himself while arising from the sofa and stumbling to the door. Bracing his foot against the bottom of the panel, he cautiously opens it a crack. He sees Mrs. Murray, his downstairs neighbor, a frail old woman, short in stature, who prominently bears the lines of her age. She wears a short-sleeved faded blue, smock-like house dress with several buttons missing. Her gray hair is tied back in a bun, secured by a piece of red yarn. Through her sobbing, she speaks breathlessly. "Let me in. Please, let me in," she stammers. He opens the door wide, and she hurries inside. She slumps exhausted into his living room chair. "What's the matter? What happened?" "I think he's dead," she answers through her sobbing. "I know he's dead." "Who's dead?" "The man in my apartment." "In your apartment?" "He came to rob me," she answers with her voice quaking. "Please, could you get me a glass of water?" Jack quickly brings her the water, and she takes a rapid gulp. Leaning back into the chair, she takes a deep long breath. As she exhales, she begins to explain. "I was in the kitchen, opening a can of cat food for Susie, when I heard a noise at my door. A thud. I got up to see what was going on, and suddenly there he was, in the doorway. He broke the door open. He was big and he had tattoos and a crowbar in his hand. He shouted, 'I need some cash. What you got?' I was so scared, I could hardly speak. I walked backward into the kitchen and tripped. I fell on the floor in the corner. I told him, 'I don't have any, except what's in the drawer.' I pointed to the drawer in the kitchen and he right away started rifling through it. Then, he looked up at me while holding a couple of bills I had in there. He yelled, 'You only got $20 in here.' Susie was hiding in the corner and she tried to run. But she's too old and slow. He caught her and grabbed her by the scruff of the neck. Then, he carried her over to the stove and turned it on. He held Susie over the burner and yelled again, 'If you don't tell me where the rest of it is, this cat is going to get lit up.' I was frantic. I couldn't let him do that to Susie. I had to stop him. I saw the cat food can lid lying on the floor next to me, and I grabbed it. I got up and rushed him. I sliced it down his neck, and blood gushed out all over. I don't know how I did it, but I did. He dropped Susie in the crowbar, and grabbed his neck. He stumbled backward. That's when he slipped on the blood and fell. He hit his head on the radiator. Then, he just laid there, stone still. I probably should have just run out, but I was so scared. I guess I wasn't thinking straight. I went and got a knife from the kitchen drawer, pulled a chair up next to him. I sat there the whole night. I was frozen with fright. He never moved once. I checked to see if he was breathing a couple of times, but he wasn't. If he'd have woken up, I don't know what I would have done." "So, he's downstairs in your kitchen?" Jack asked. "Yes. I'll be right back. Give me the key and stay right here." "Here's the key, but you don't need it." He pried the door wide open. Jack slowly walked downstairs, to the floor below, in measured stealthy steps. Cautiously, he peers into Mrs. Murray's apartment. He rounded the corner, into the kitchen. There he was. He looked to be in his 20s, at most. His large lifeless body was lying prone next to the blood-stained radiator. It was just as she had said. A large red coagulating pool had radiated outward across the floor behind him, encircling his head. A smaller stream of blood had trickled from the gash above his left ear, down his cheek, and over his jaw. It partially obscured the FM tattoo on his neck. His eyes were closed, and his mouth was open wide, in a frozen scream. Even in death, his face wore the sinister grimace Mrs. Murray described. From the look of him, Jack immediately knew Mrs. Murray was right, but still he bent down and rested his hand on the man's chest just to be sure. There was no heartbeat. He is cold and motionless. Jack felt the wrist. It too, was cold and pulseless. "Dead, all right," he mutters softly to himself. Suddenly, he hears the muted creak of a footstep in the hallway. Then, silence before more footsteps. Slowly, he picks up the crowbar which is lying on the floor beside the dead man. He slowly moves away from the body, backing into the shadows of the pantry. Another creak comes from the hallway. Jack carefully peers around the corner of the pantry's door. Mrs. Murray is standing in the doorway with her hand over her mouth, and staring at the lifeless corpse on her floor. "I thought I told you to stay upstairs," Jack scolds her. "I couldn't stay up there alone. I was so afraid, she answers in a tearful, quaking voice. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? Jack lowers the crowbar and hesitates, before starting to speak. We can't have this spread all over. He's a gang member and they'll want revenge. We can't call the cops either. If they see the cops coming here, they'll find out in no time. Then, what should I do? Again she pleads. Well, we can't just leave him lying here on the kitchen floor. Let me go upstairs. You stay here. I'll be right back. And, this time do what I tell you. Stay here. As Jack leaves, Mrs. Murray takes another knife from the kitchen drawer. Then, she sits back in the chair next to the body. She holds the knife firmly, ready to strike should the man awaken. Jack returns shortly, holding several large plastic garbage bags, a telephone cord, and a pair of scissors. Get your vacuum cleaner and the hose with it, he tells her. As she does, he cuts a short piece of the cord, and proceeds to fold the man's outstretched arms across his chest. He places the hands together and binds them. Cutting another piece of the cord, he loops it through the crook of the knees and draws them together while tying the other end behind the dead man's neck. Tucking the knees up to the chest, he pulls the body into a fetal position and ties it tightly. Mrs. Murray returns with the vacuum. Upon seeing the body folded into its tucked pose, she stops in the doorway and gasps. Jack explains, I had to tie him up so we can put him in the bag. If we wait any longer he'll stiffen up, and we'll never be able to get him in. Give me one of those bags. She holds a bag out to him. No. Open the end. When I lift him up, you slide that bag over his head as far as you can. She nods. Okay, here we go. He lifts the dead man's head, and she slides the bag over it, over the shoulders and down until the upper portion of the body is completely covered. Now, Jack continues, I'll lift the other end, and you pull the bag all the way over. Okay. 1, 2, 3. Pull. They persevere until the corpse is finally fully inside the bag. Jack stands upright and speaks with an air of satisfaction. Lucky I remembered seeing those bags in the super's closet, he just fit perfectly. Now, give me the hose and plug the vacuum in. Mrs. Murray hands him the hose, and, firmly, with both hands, he clamps the bag's opening around it. Okay, start it up. As the vacuum roars into life, it sucks out the air and the bag quickly shrinks, revealing the outline of the body inside. When it is taut around the body, Jack ties the bag's opening with a piece of the telephone cord. Now, go clean out the bottom of your bedroom closet, and bring me the biggest towel you have, he tells her. Rolling the bag onto the large towel, together they drag it to the closet. He's not as light as he looks, Jack comments. Let's hope he fits in here. They roll the bag-encased body off the towel and into the closet. Jack pushes it deep inside, as far as he can. Breathing heavily, he asks, do you have any moth flakes? Yes. She retrieves the moth flakes, and Jack scatters them around the floor of the closet. He takes clothes off of their hangers and uses them to cover the body. We can't just leave him here, can we? She asks anxiously. We've got a few days to figure this out. He's going to keep just fine in that bag with the air sucked out. Let's go clean up the kitchen. I can't stay here with him in the closet like that, Mrs. Murray protests. I'll be scared to death. What if he wakes up? Wakes up? Are you kidding me? Until I see Jesus Christ coming through that door, he's not waking up, Jack replies sarcastically. I still can't stay here. I'm so scared. Jack pauses and sighs. Okay, you can come up and stay with me for a while. You can have the bed. I'll stay on the sofa. Oh, thank you. Thank you. She exclaims exuberantly. Then, she adds meekly. What about Susie? Again, Jack pauses and sighs. Oh, shit. Okay, the cat can come too. Just be sure and bring the litter box. Jack has a hard time sleeping that night. Maybe he should have called the cops after all. It's too late now. He's already cleaned up the crime scene and hidden the body. As for what he should do next, he'll have to worry about that in the morning. When 6 a.m. arrives, Jack is lying on his sofa, wide awake, and he's hardly slept. He's been back downstairs a dozen times in the middle of the night, checking the bag in the closet. Maybe, if he looked enough times, it would disappear. He arises, and carefully checks on Mrs. Murray, who is asleep in his bedroom. After he dresses, he once again goes down to her apartment to check the body. Cautiously, he opens the closet and peers inside. He takes a deep breath, sniffing the air. 2 days later, the body is still in the closet, and Mrs. Murray is still staying in his bed while he sleeps on the sofa. Sucking the air out of the bag seems to be working pretty well. The only odor seeping under the closet door is that of the moth flakes. So far, So good, he thinks to himself, after checking the closet for the umpteenth time.